My name is Layla Jane. I'm 18 years old, and I am a woman who has detransitioned. I began transitioning at 12 years old. 12 years old when I started Lupron and testosterone, and it was only a month after my 13th birthday that I had a double mastectomy.
At just 13 years old, Layla Jane underwent a double mastectomy after being put on puberty blockers and testosterone. Now, she is fighting back, suing her healthcare provider, Kaiser Permanente, for rushing her into irreversible procedures that left her broken, both physically and emotionally. Imagine being barely a teenager, yet forced into life-altering medical procedures with irreversible consequences. That's Layla's reality, but how did it all happen? How was she led down this path, and what has it cost her? Layla's story is one that exposes the horrifying truth behind so-called gender-affirming care, and how it can destroy lives in the name of ideology. Like so many other children, Layla Jane was going through an emotionally turbulent time at the age of 12. Struggling with anxiety, body image issues, and the pressures of adolescence, she turned to her doctors for help. But instead of addressing her mental health struggles, her doctors offered her a quick fix: gender transition.
The hardest part was being sold something that I believed was gonna help me and make me feel better, only to do all of it, and come out on the other side not feeling any better.
Layla's vulnerability was exploited by a system that saw transitioning as the solution to every problem, regardless of her mental state. Studies have shown that children like Layla are particularly susceptible to external influences during adolescence, a time when emotional and psychological development is critical.
They really kind of ignored my comorbid mental health issues like anxiety and whatnot. I remember one of my doctors said that if I transition, my anxiety and my mental health would get better.
Instead of taking the time to understand her, they pushed her toward irreversible treatments, reducing her pain to a simple checkbox in their radical agenda.
The case of Layla Jane, a young girl whose breasts were removed at age 13 by doctors who fed her a lie.
Take this next case. Layla Jane was born a girl.
Layla Jane experienced a host of medical issues in her youth. Her mother, who is bipolar, expressed to these physicians and therapists that her daughter might be bipolar, but she actually never received any diagnosis or treatment for that. The family went to one physician who, after less than a 2-hour appointment, green-lighted the hormone therapy, and in a similarly or even shorter period of time, a plastic surgeon signed off after one visit on removing her breasts.
I was given no information about rates of desistance or anything like that. Really, the surgery and the treatments were kind of pushed as the only way forward.
Doctors gave you a drug called Lupron. This drug has been used to chemically castrate sex offenders, pedophiles in prison, but they prescribed it to you to stop your hormones. Is that correct?
Correct. At 12 years old.
Do you believe that you were given informed consent about the risks of puberty blockers?
I don't think so. I think, it was spoken of very lightly. They really did say it's just a pause. There were some slight concerns about my bone development, but, they just told me to take some vitamin D.
That's it. That's the only thing they were concerned about while giving you a chemical castration drug that they give to pedophiles that isn't actually designed or made to stop your puberty. It's not even approved for that. They're just playing, doctor. They're doing science experiments on little kids. At that age, we're still very much a kid, right?
Right. I was really naive. I didn't have an understanding of the world. I wasn't even in high school yet.
Layla is not the only child who is being targeted by gender-affirming care, as her lawyer pointed out.
Laura, I think there are thousands of them, and as the statistics show, the majority of the people who go through this as a child, they realize that it was a phase, it was improper diagnosis, and they desist. But it isn't as simple as taking a medication for your acne. There are permanent, lasting, irreversible changes to a girl's body through taking these drugs, even for a couple of years, much less the 5 or 6 years. In this case, her breast cannot be reconstructed or returned, and unknown consequences on fertility. So this is really experimentation on America's children. And I think you or I probably were not aware of the extent to which this is happening. And it is, I mean, I'm getting thousands of calls from people all over the country, and unfortunately, most are beyond the statute of limitations.
This lack of informed consent is one of the most egregious aspects of Layla's case. She was led to believe that these treatments were safe and reversible, when in reality, they have caused permanent damage. Layla, now just 18, will carry these scars forever, a lifetime of consequences from decisions made as a child.
It's very conflicting, but honestly, I'm very upset that it was done to me so young, and also, not to mention, in a headspace where I just shouldn't have been able to make those kind of decisions. I was in a place when I made those decisions where I did not have my comorbidities under control. And that just shouldn't be how it is when you make these types of decisions. There's just a lot that goes into making such life-changing choices that it's almost under duress when you have all these comorbidities stacked up in these issues.
Doctors are supposed to do no harm, but in Layla's case, they did the opposite. Her story is not just an isolated incident. It is part of a larger systemic problem that prioritizes ideology over patient care. Do you want a dead daughter or a transgender son? This lie has been repeatedly used by so-called healthcare providers to deceive parents, threatening them that if their children are not transitioned, they will commit suicide. With this lie, these so-called gender-affirming care providers trick parents into signing documents to allow their children to transition. The richest man on earth, Elon Musk, has fallen victim to this approach. In an interview with Dr. Peterson, he revealed that the doctor said the exact same lie, leaving him have no choice but to agree to transition his son Xavier. Dr. Peterson has just rejected this lie.
That was a lie right from the outset. No reliable clinician ever believed that. There was never any evidence for that. And also, if there's a higher suicide rate, the reason is because of the underlying depression and anxiety and not because of the gender dysphoria. And every goddamn clinician knows that too. And they're too cowardly to come out and say it. Right? And so and then we end up in exactly, when I saw that lie start to propagate, it just made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It's like, I see. So you're telling parents that unless they agree to this radical transformation that their children are going to die, and you think that's moral, and you think that's true. That is so pathological that it's almost incomprehensible. I can't imagine anything worse. I can't imagine a therapist doing anything worse than that, or sitting by idly and remaining silent while his colleagues are doing it. It's pathetic.
Dr. Peterson is right. No study supports this barbaric practice. Dr. Jennifer Bowens, who has over 25 years of experience as a trauma therapist, shares similar concerns. She has testified before Congress and expressed extreme concerns about gender-affirming care for children. She said this intervention is causing harm to children and lacks study support. Here are some key points from her hearing. Lack of empirical evidence. Dr. Bowens argues that gender-affirming care is based on ideological consensus rather than solid scientific research. She highlights that many psychological disorders are treated with much more caution, but gender dysphoria is often met with the most invasive interventions. High desistance rate. Dr. Bowens points out that 85% of children experiencing gender dysphoria desist if left alone and not medically intervened upon. This statistic is far higher than the success rates of most psychological interventions, making early medical transition not only unnecessary, but potentially unethical. Questioning the link to suicide. She also rejects the claim that withholding gender-affirming care increases suicide risk.
And 4, it is often claimed that a failure to provide these interventions increases the risk for suicide. This approach is actually unethical, and it's a clear departure from the practice of empowerment and self-management, which are important goals of mental health practice. This claim is also not supported by the literature. Despite years of empirical study, there is no definitive understanding of the etiology in the suicide literature.
Significant high suicide rate among transgenders. Dr. Bowens also cited a Swedish study, finding that individuals who undergo gender transition surgeries have a suicide rate significantly higher than the general population, casting doubt on the claim that these treatments are life-saving.
But what the data that we do have, which is probably the most reliable data point available is from a Swedish study, and it looked at over 10 years, which is really important because regret doesn't just happen a year after some sort of transition. And what you see is a suicide rate that's associated with 19 times higher than the general population.
International backlash.
After a review of the literature, other countries have actually backed away from gender transition procedures, and the list now includes the United Kingdom, France, Finland, Norway, Australia, and Sweden.
A long-term study from researchers in the Netherlands found that children will eventually grow out of gender confusion. The researchers concluded that it's normal for adolescents to have doubts about their identity, including gender identity, and that this is fairly common during this age. According to an unpublished study, puberty blockers did not seem to improve the mental health of children ages 8 to 16. The woke lead researcher and a trans rights advocate has delayed to release the study, claiming that whoever opposes gender-affirming care will weaponize the study to stop this treatment for children. Today, Layla is seeking justice. She is suing Kaiser Permanente for pushing her into radical treatments without adequately exploring her mental health or providing proper informed consent.
Harmy, this is like the tobacco companies. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing it anyway. I think there's a massive class action in the offing here of all these young people who have been tricked into doing this and have been lied to repeatedly. And the only way to stop this is to defeat them in court, unless there's a federal legal avenue that can be taken. But they have to basically be bankrupted before they're going to learn.
Layla's lawsuit may set a precedent for others who feel betrayed by the medical community. With major institutions now potentially liable, this case could expose negligence that places ideology over a child's well-being. Join the fight to stop this dangerous agenda from destroying more lives. Let's protect our children and demand accountability from those who have turned gender transition into a life-altering medical experiment. If you found this video informative, please like and subscribe for more content that challenges prevailing narratives. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.